My retreat doesn't always mean that I'm being weak. Sometimes I retreat so that I can get stronger. There were times when Christ Joshua would steal away, go into places of solitude so that he can be reminded of that which lives on the inside. When I started really beginning to embrace this fact, because it happened when I was younger, but I was afraid to fully embrace the fact that Christ Joshua came as an example. I tussled with whether to receive the doctrine that Jesus was God, and because I never read where it said I had to believe that Jesus was God in order to be, quote unquote saved. But it was taught, and so therefore I kind of went with it and then felt bad when I didn't go with it. They would quote John and that beginning passage. And I remember tussling with it because something in me knew that I was supposed to understand Christ Joshua from the perspective of an example, as one that endured, one that had a testimony of, hey, I went through this process. I'm just like you. You can make it through this process too. That's what resonates with me. And we should overcome by the word of the testimony and the blood of the Lamb. The blood of the Lamb was the example of him fulfilling his purpose, what he believed and knew that his purpose was in this earth. The blood was shed for that reason, because there was a determination that I'm going to show this example. The cross, the resurrection, all of those depictions are examples and symbolizations. As Christ elevated to a different mindset, there was something different about the things that he did. But it wasn't favoritism or anything like that got him over. When he was being baptized, and it said, and then the Holy Spirit descended upon him as a dove, meaning at that point, Christness, or the Christhood, Christ-mindedness was now asserted. That was a moment of awakening, of approval by God that you got it. And with that baptism, after came the temptation, which means for temptation, he needed strength. In a place of sacrifice, which, 40 days, 40 nights, in a place of sacrifice, you get weak. In this time of opposition, or being prepared for opposition, there's a time where you go and you begin to start sacrificing things in order to get clear and to get strong. That was an example for me. I realized that because God looks at the heart while man looks at the outward appearance, there's going to always be something that's against. But when I retreat, I go in to find out and remember, not even find out, but to remember, to know who I am at the core of myself. Be reminded that you are in purpose and on purpose. Be reminded that I made no mistake with you. Be reminded not to become the very thing that hurt you. Do the work. Heal the heart. Sort through the things in your heart and your mind that wants you to just go ahead and yield to that temptation of not loving anymore. The temptation to just have a hard heart and to be numb to everything in this world. Some people begin to establish this me, it's about me, I'm doing self-care and all of that, just to go and to be selfish, to carry that hard heart with them in order to establish themselves and their purpose and their dreams. And though it is absolutely okay to go within yourself and to have that God confidence that you are everything God wanted you to be, doing that, believing that you're the only one and disregarding everybody else in the world, that's not the way that it's going to stick. When you begin to follow the example of Christ Joshua, when you begin to understand the concept, I don't care who believes that he really existed or not really existed or whatever. I identify with the story. I identify with the man. I identify with the experience. And so therefore it makes sense to me. I see my journey when I go back and read his journey. I see myself in the prodigal son. I see myself in the disciples who had to give up things to follow a true purpose and a true call. I see myself in the story. I'll be able to relate to other stories as well, but this was my foundation, and I don't find that this foundation is a wrong one. I find that I had to discover what it really meant to me. And in order to do that, I had to be free to do so. So, I identify with Christ Joshua as one who led the way. But I also see him as the one who had to learn the way in this flesh. Had to die to flesh just like us. So when you take up your cross and follow the same mind that was in Joshua, which is the Christ mind, then that means you take up all the burdens, all the pain, all the heartache, all the trauma, all the unforgiveness, all of the stuff that is allowing for you to become the very thing that hurt you, and you give it all away. Anything that keeps you from remembering that you are a part of the greater whole and that you're here to serve humanity just like you desire for humanity to serve you. We're all here one to another. When you begin to adopt a different mindset, be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, not to conform to the world. In other words, I'm not trying to conform to what everybody else assumes that I should be. I am on this journey to find out who I already am. When that death happened, that taking up the cross, carrying that cross, someone coming along to help him carry that cross when need be, the times when he went into isolation just so that he can get strengthened within himself because he knew what he was about to go into. I take note when he got on that cross and they mocked him right in the middle of the worst suffering of his time. They mocked, they teased, tried to find more fault, kept pushing at him. For years it was hard, like, ooh, should I compare myself to this story? Well, I'm supposed to compare myself to all the other Bible stories, but not to this one. No, it doesn't make sense. So now it has to make sense to me for it to be faith. So I identify with the crucifixion, and I identify with this time right now of laying down and having 3 days or however long I need for this body to rest until this actual all me authentic self comes and rises up from underneath the very thing that they buried her under. Now I really understand what it means when Trusum said to me, a treasure is still a treasure beneath the dirt. When you spring up, you bloom, you awaken, you decide that I can no longer take that suffering. I don't have to. I don't have to. But I won't allow the suffering to make my heart hard. No. When I look back over all of it, I understand what the dirt was. It was both to bury me for a season and to cover for a season. Now it's time to bloom. All the value that was in me beneath that dirt is the same value, if not even more, because I recognize it now and not just others. It's that very thing that's going to cause for others to be able to behold the beauty of God, to pick from those petals, to pick from those bushes, to pick from those the livelihood of what God has produced from this seed beneath the dirt. And I do that with humility. I say that with humility. Every book I write, every speech I give, every coaching session, every spiritual advisory session, everything that I give, I want it to be from a pure heart. And so with that being said, it's not weak for me to isolate. I recognize now that what may have been the low in my bipolar swing is really the time of isolation and cave time so that God can minister to me. so that my angels can come and minister to me. There was a time after the temptation where then it was over, the enemy fled, and the angel came to minister to Christ Joshua right before he had to go out there into the fullness of his purpose, not expecting for it to be perfect, knowing what was coming, but being willing to face it anyway, because it might lead to another death. But in every death, there's a resurrection.